puffing up gales of smoke, then tore loose the sheet and threw it in a tight ball into the Hello Sunshine crate he used for a trash bin. The oranges on the label went on smiling their asses off. They didn't give a shit. He wore his daily uniform of blue flannel shirt. The roomy pockets were good for tobacco and extra cartridges, whipcords, and Arapaho moccasins, dependable range wear he preferred to any suit of clothes made to his measure in St. Louis. The creature comforts were all a man cared about at the finish. He tried again, rolling in a new sheet and stabbing the keys with 2 fingers. Kid Curry had a cross eye, and you never knew whether he was shooting at you or someone else until the slug hit home. He shook his head again and sent that page after the last. There wasn't anything wrong with what he wrote, just with the subject. He was plumb written out on the wild bunch. Once he put a memory on paper, it ceased to be real, as if it was a story someone else had told him. Considering how many books he'd written, he was on the point of rubbing out his entire life. Maybe that was what happened when a fellow got old and forgetful, not remembering if he'd eaten and disgracing himself in his pants. Maybe they were all memoirists. The only time things came back to him, really came back like he was watching them from the front row of a picture house, was when he dreamed, or when something familiar brought them bearing down on him like the Sunset Limited, which was dreaming too, he decided. But when he reached for them on purpose, they were as dead as old man Pinkerton, the only person in history ornery enough to have bitten himself to death. He sat back again, puffing tobacco and scraping his gaze along the shelf of his books for inspiration. Water-stained, every one. Could have been worse. He had just gotten them out from under the last new leak before they soaked up enough to swell up like a dead steer. No help there. They were headstones erected over the graves of murdered memories. He wondered what Ince was up to. The man had been a pest in the old days, sending him weekly wires pleading for permission to make a picture play out of one of his titles. But he'd been proud then, not wanting to see some jasper with painted lips and false eyelashes prancing around in front of a camera, pretending to be him. And eventually, Ince had gotten tired of being turned down and stopped writing. A year ago, that was. He couldn't believe it was 1921. Now he'd sell him the whole bunch for the cash to fix the roof. Tomorrow, he'd run down to the library and see if he was listed in the directory. Then all he'd need was a nickel for the phone. He disregarded the knock at first, thinking it was a new note courtesy of the rain. As the receptacles filled, the pitch changed. If he were musically inclined, he'd have experimented by moving them around, raising or lowering the levels of the water, reaching for some tune he recognized. It was no more a waste of time than trying to coax a story out of his worn-out brain, and might have gotten him a job in vaudeville. When it came again, he got up, threw a rubberized cover over the typewriter in case another leak opened up above it, and went to the door, scooping up his old brown Colt on the way. Los Angeles was filled with Mexicans fleeing the failure of the revolution, and the elderly were the favorite prey of banditti looking for grub stakes. "Who's there?" He had to shout to be heard through the thick panels. The rain had stepped up, clinging on the iron roof and striking the drip catchers hard enough to slap water off the surfaces onto the floor.
"Oh, let me in, Charlie. I'm wet through."
He couldn't tell if the voice was familiar, but at least it came without a Spanish accent. He slid back the heavy bolt and opened the door 3 inches, thumbing back the cold hammer in the same motion. The face was leaner than he remembered, gaunt, the handlebars white, the strong jowls loose now and wobbly. A pair of brows, still dark but growing wild, drew together over faded gray eyes.
"Don't you know me, Charlie? It's Earp."
"I can see that. Which one are you?" They'd looked alike, that whole pack of brothers, and not even a trained detective could tell them apart at a glance. That was one of the reasons there had been so much confusion among the witnesses as to who did what in that mess in Tombstone.
"The one that's left, you gonna let me in and cut loose with that dog's hind leg? It gets me out of my misery either way you choose."
"I guess it's a Christian thing to do." He took the revolver off cock and stepped